I'm going to hand back to Felicia now to moderate the final session of this morning, and she'll be doing a more formal introduction to Justin Hanney, who is, of course, the Chief Executive Officer at the City of Melbourne, a man with a big job. And so I'd just like to hand over to you both now. Thank you, Felicia. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. And those questions, Justin, were probably a great segue to our little piece, in that, you know, it is great to see that people are keen to get back into the city and keen to re-engage with our wonderful Melbourne once again. Justin, I know that the City of Melbourne has done an enormous amount of work already, very significant work, in trying to, I guess, regenerate the vibrancy of our city. And I've been very pleased to collaborate with you with the formation of the City Economy Advisory Committee that the city has formed. So that's one great initiative. But what do you see in some of that work that you've already done? What do you see as some of the key challenges that are confronting the city as we come out of lockdown and hopefully commence on the early stages of a road to recovery?
Thanks, Felicia. Look, at the challenge of the city is, you know, on a daily basis, pre-COVID, 1 million people come into the city every day, Monday to Friday. A big chunk of them are office workers, and that they've had a big change to their pattern of working. So working flexibly, working from home has had its advantages. But if major employers and employers don't bring their workforce back to a degree, then the impact on that, and our forecasted numbers say that 2021 will see, you know, at best 650 to 700,000 workers returning to the city, people in the city. So without international tourists, without international education, and with a percentage of office workers returning, that impact just plays out. It plays out on foot traffic, it plays out on retail. Felicia, in retail, we've also seen an accelerated, which has been great, accelerated online purchasing, click and collect, etc. But that also has an impact on retail. So those two things combined, foot traffic and digitalisation technology, is going to have a direct impact on the city. So just as I heard Marianne say, bringing people to the regions is important. I can tell you there is nothing more important than bringing people back to the city. Felicia, we had some work done by PricewaterhouseCoopers that you've been privy to that shows that the city's economy is worth about $100 billion per annum. That will be reduced by about $100 billion over the coming 4 to 5 years. That's 20 to 25% impact on the city's economy. The impact on the state's economy, more than 50% of the impact is going to be felt inside the 40 square kilometres of the City of Melbourne.
And it's interesting, Justin, because we've been saying for a long time that the capital cities, and that is someplace I think where Sydney and Melbourne are holding hands right now, is just that, you know, there is a huge challenge with those two capital cities because we have been so reliant on international visitors, on major events, on business events, and indeed our international students to really drive our visitor economy. So capital cities really do have, I think, the much harder task in front of them as we step out of whatever lockdown is going to look like, or I should say whatever COVID normal is going to look like here in Victoria. Justin, you mentioned about the importance of getting, you know, workers back into the city, and that is so critical, and building that confidence level. We've been hearing quite a bit about that today as well. I know that Clemengers has actually launched today their new campaign, Let's Melbourne Again, which is a great initiative that's been underwritten by a whole lot of businesses who are, you know, very passionate about our capital city and want to see its vibrancy returned. And I know that the City of Melbourne is supporting that as well. How do you see, I mean, this is obviously a great step, but how do you see kind of moving to some fast tracking of trying to get some people back into the city? You know, I love the idea of keeping people late in the city, and Minister talked about, you know, staying on for dinner, or I think that was actually Jacinta Allen spoke about that, and the voucher systems. These things can all come together, but what are some of your ideas that are seeing us hopefully fast track that regeneration?
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. Look, so firstly, the Let's Melbourne Again campaign that Clemenger have put together, and you've been party to that and others, it's a cracker campaign. It's terrific, and we're a party to it. We're investing in it. We're partnering with it, and it plays out. Small businesses can use it, so it's got good buy-in, and it's got a soft launch in the paper today, but a formal launch at 1 o'clock today, and you'll see that play out over the coming months. So a campaign marketing to people is important. The safety, and Jacinda Allen spoke about this earlier, safety and perception of safety. I heard the poll there, that people in this room, 52 odd percent of people, 53, 54% of people talked about safety and the importance of bringing people back. We're doing some research as we speak. Last Thursday, I met with the 10 biggest employers in the city. CEOs of ANZ, Telstra, NAB, etc. And their comment was, and we're trying to assess what's the authorising environment to bring people back. And what it kept coming back to was the perception that, but we accept that there is a flexible work arrangement that will exist going forward. They talked about the importance of not just having people not being in the city, for example, on Fridays, the importance of spreading their workforce across those 4 or 5 days. Part of that, Felicia, as well, is going to be the importance of public transport. The timing, the frequency, the cleanliness, the staggering of people's work times is really, really important. We've got a campaign, you're party to that. We've had more than 100 people work on different subcommittees, and 2 of those critical ones. One of them is bringing people back to the city, that you've been supportive enough to be chairing that, and thank you. And another one that Brenda McClements is chairing, called City Events and Activation.
Yes.
So a few things we're doing. We will have thousands of buskers throughout the city, but guest appearances from some really, I won't call them out yet, but some really well-known names of Melbourne identity performers who will busk in different locations throughout the city. As at Friday, Felicia, we had the team working right throughout the public holiday and all weekend, but as at this morning, we've issued more than 1,000 permits for outdoor dining, and not just issued the permits, we've really curated with the restaurants and cafes those spaces to enable outdoor dining to occur. We've planted during COVID, on any given year, we've planted 2,000 to 3,000 trees in the city. We will have planted by end of November 150,000 trees and shrubs, new ones throughout the city. A couple of the cool laneways in the city, Hosier Lane and the likes, we're doing another 40 laneways like that with the support from state government. So 40 laneways are being converted. So some of those lanes that people look down, they look a bit grotty and ugly and smelly, they're being converted to be like your Hosier lanes. So there's some really good initiatives that are occurring, but it's not going to be without its challenges.
No. And I think talking about those challenges, one of the things, and obviously all the involvement I've had with some of the hospitality sector as well in terms of navigating through where we are, obviously there's going to be restrictions around going forward. No matter what happens, we're going to have social distancing and density requirements that we're going to have to contend with. There'll be caps on numbers of indoors and outdoors. But then there is something about, the vibrancy and the vibe itself of Melbourne has always been, because it's been kind of crowded and hectic and everything is close quarters. So can you see those 2 things somehow finding a way to coexist in some COVID normal world?
Look, I can. I really can. The work that the team has done, so there's the Let's Melbourne Again campaign, which is to bring people from regional Victoria out of metro. If I'm in Glen Waverley, what's the trigger for me to come into the city? So what's the events and the attractiveness of the city? And again, the public transport safety and perception of safety, really critically important. So combined with that, we've got a campaign call which we'll be running with, called Melbourne On. So when people come into the city, the importance of being safe, feeling safe. The importance of making sure that people, again, I heard Jacinda Allen earlier talk about the importance of people continuing to wear masks and the like. We know that the difference between, so we've been looking at other cities throughout the world, and what is it that's brought their workforce and their people back. And if there's been good initiatives and ideas, we're using those and adopting those. So wayward signage in the city is going to be going to be really important, making sure that people continue to be aware of washing hands, wearing masks, etc. But Felicia, if you sit below that and have a look, so Sydney at the moment is sitting at 35% of their workforce returning. Perth, which is one of the safest bubbles in the world, is only just on 65%. Berlin's at 80%. Paris is up at 70+%. Now, in those cities, they've really done some things to make sure that people, it's not just that people are safe. There is an absolute perception promoted, so people are aware they're safe. People aren't scared about coming back to the city. When we encourage them to come back, they will be safe. And so the importance of making sure that we are both safe and we are letting people know we are safe is going to be imperative.
You know, Justin, I've been thinking a lot, and particularly some of the work that we've done with you guys around the various groups that have been created. There is a different, there's a different personality and a different love affair, I think, that Melbourne has with its CBD, and I'm talking Greater Melbourne when I say Melbourne. I think that's been played out enormously, and we've looked at it through what's come up now with the Let's Melbourne Again campaign, which is terrific. But I know that your team is also looking at a whole range of coordination of events to bring people back. Because that's the other thing that's come up as well, is how do you manage that calendar? Because we're going to have, you know, a tiny window where everyone's going to want to come out and start doing their events. But how do you manage that? So do you want to talk a little bit about, I know that the City of Melbourne's doing, a great piece of work in that calendar management and trying to, give everybody some airtime when events can happen again.
Yeah, look, and Felicia, it is the likes of, leadership here is so critically important. Your leadership, Brenda McClement's leadership, Katrina McKenzie, Louise Scott. And the most important thing we've got to do here, and we have been doing, is making sure that we're coordinated, that we have got, whether they are smaller events happening in North Melbourne, the Docklands, in Richmond, as you say, it's not Melbourne, it's Greater Melbourne, and making sure that we are absolutely coordinated. We've got, a small war chest, $100 million, $50 million from the city and $50 million from state. We've got the capacity to buy and invest in existing events to help them come back, or to look at new events. I know, speaking earlier with Martin Pakula, he's received some really good initiatives. The city here have received some good initiatives. So working alongside VTIC, working alongside Visit Victoria, working alongside City of Melbourne and other groups, whether or not they're key, cultural groups like NGV and Square, etc. But making sure that we've got a really clever, smart calendar that complements other things and other activities throughout the city is so critically important. And I just think we're hearing just some brilliant ideas that have come forward, and some of those we're all investing in. So the outdoor dining, and bringing buskers to outdoor dining, and having potential celebrities like, whether it be a Paul Kelly or someone like that, just guest appearing and popping up throughout the city. That is Melbourne. And I heard, Felicia, John Kunkel, who was Scott Morrison's chief of staff, I was talking to 2 weeks ago, and he talked about Sydney is so focused on its harbour and its beaches. Melbourne is so focused on its heart, its cultural institutions, its restaurants, its events, its activities, including its sporting activities. And us harnessing the spirit of that to make sure Melbourne revives is so important. So leadership, coordination and inspiration and innovation around activities and events is something we're all heavily invested in.
And I know that our events sector, we've got a number of people on the line here today from the events world. We'll be pleased to hear that, Justin, because, obviously our big hallmark events, our Grand Prix and our Australian Open Tennis, they are so critical to the heart and soul of the city. But as are the events and festivals, which many of those tend to happen in and around the city. So hearing the city's commitment to events and what it will take to revitalise that sector, I know has an awful lot of relevance and will ring, very true to the hearts of many of the events people that I know are on the call today. So thanks for sharing some of that thinking. One other thing I wanted to just talk about briefly, Justin, border restrictions obviously are a problem, and whether those are border restrictions just domestically here or obviously longer term, which has a huge impact on Melbourne because of our reliance on international visitation. But just looking at it, I guess, domestically, how important do you see those border restrictions getting lifted as being a contributor to Melbourne's quick recovery, which we desperately need?
Yeah, look, I think it's imperative, Felicia. I think that the messaging we're getting back, and in particular from Austrade, they've done some international market research, and Brand Melbourne is not impacted internationally. So Brand Australia and Brand Melbourne, Australia is still seen as, we are the leader in COVID response, and we are a safe place. So, we're concerned when we see numbers of 7 and 10, or 10 or 15 being reported. So internationally, good brand. Our issue I think we've got is intrastate. If I'm sitting in Sydney or Adelaide or Perth right now, we've seen Tasmania open up, but not to Sydney and not to Melbourne. So when we're right, and I think that I'm excited, and I think your capabilities that you sit with yourself at VTIC and with Brendan McClements and his team at Visit Victoria, our intrastate campaign is going to be really important. Again, we are safe and turning Melbourne back on. You said before, yes, we've got the grand slam of events around Grand Prix and tennis and AFL Grand Final, but we all know that it's the hundreds of smaller events that make up that give us our cultural heart. And I think that intrastate promotion and campaigning and opening up those borders is so important. And when we do, tripling down our effort and our spend. I felt sad watching the grand final on Saturday night. Everyone said what a great job Queensland did, and they did, but how bloody sad was that?
I think the saddest thing was listening to Mike play in an empty MCG. I know it was supposed to be a good idea, but I know many of my friends that I spoke to, they said it was just kind of like putting salt in the wound to just show how sad it was not to have the event here. So let's hope that it never happens again. And next year we're going to be on track to put on even a bigger, better, brighter and bolder event than we've ever done before. But look, I think it is so imperative that our event sector gets back up and running. That is really, as you say, Justin, it is absolutely the heart and soul. Can I just probably close on one last question? You touched a little bit about this around our reputation as a COVID-safe environment. I know that the city, and you've talked a bit about some of the things that you're doing to help restore public confidence and people coming back into the city, but this role around public transport and indeed some, infrastructure and also I think technology, that's emerging as well. How are we going to use technology potentially in the city as a means by making people feel more comfortable with coming into a, somewhat of a crowded environment, which they might be a bit afraid of at the moment. Again, I know you're doing some work in that space, might be interesting to share with people.
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. So we've been working really closely with Yarra Trams, Metro, Department of Transport. What was fascinating, I just didn't realise it so much, which is why we're undertaking this research piece, which will be available next week and we'll share it, which is if I am sitting at home right now and I'm in Glen Waverley or in Werribee and my job is in the city, what is the motivating factor for me to come back and what's the authorising environment? So we're researching who is it that people listen to? Where do they source that information from? Is it a premier? Is it a chief health officer? Is it the CEO of the Metro train network? So one is where do they source it? Two is what is it that will be the lever for them to know that it is safe? Now we know that therefore it's making sure that there is more trains, which we understand that the Department of Transport are going to commit to, more trains. That they are less crowded, and that to do that, we as employers have to commit that we are thinking about the timing. So at City of Melbourne, we've made a commitment. We're bringing back our 2,000 employees. We will think about staggered start time so that everyone's not on a train at 7:30 in the morning, and where we've got flexible arrangements in other employers. So the head of the ANZ Bank, Shane Elliott, is talking about making sure that he hasn't got his staff all at home on Friday. He's spreading that workforce so that we're using, it's the supply and demand around transport that's going to matter greatly. They need to look at the supply side. we as employers need to really think about the demand side and how we're putting, how we're giving the best opportunity for the network to be able to operate. Now, in saying all of that, there is some really good technology the Department of Transport and Metro will be using, and I'm excited by that because I think it is going to prevent for a much safer, better city and a transport network that's going to be bringing people back into the city.
It's almost exciting to listen to some of the things that are happening, because while this has been the worst thing to go through ever in our lifetimes, the fact is that there's been some great initiatives and innovations that have come out of all of this. And if I have to say on a personal note, I'd be really happy to come in at 10 and work until 6 or 7, because that suits me down to the ground. So the staggering idea is music to my ears. Justin, thank you so very much. I know you've got an enormous amount on your plate right now. It's such a busy time with everything that's going on in the city. So thank you so very much for joining us today and sharing so much with us.
And Felicia, thank you, and thanks for your leadership. VTIC really is going ahead in leaps and bounds, and we're looking forward to continuing to support you as you do so. Great leadership. Well done to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Justin. It's